There is a passage in Ezekiel, chapter 47, that most people read as prophecy and move on. Slow down on verse 12. Trees growing beside a river, and this, their fruit will serve for food, and their leaves for healing. Not their fruit alone, their leaves. A specific botanical distinction written 2,600 years ago. Sirach chapter 38 is even more direct. The Lord hath created medicines out of the earth, and he that is wise will not abhor them. Medicines out of the earth, not out of a laboratory, out of the ground beneath your feet, the disturbed soil at the edge of your driveway, the untended corner of your yard where you keep meaning to do something but never quite get around to it.
What we call weeds are plants with extraordinary adaptive intelligence. They appear specifically in the environments humans create, in disturbed soil, in compacted earth, in the margins of cultivated land, as if drawn to the places where people live. What modern pharmaceutical research keeps discovering, one isolated compound at a time, is that these plants contain some of the most sophisticated antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, and regenerative chemistry ever identified in living organisms. Today, we are walking through 12 of those plants, almost certainly growing within reach of your home right now. Pay close attention to number 1. The research on its antimicrobial properties against drug-resistant bacteria is among the most compelling on this entire list. And when we reach number 5, stay with me for the story attached to it, because the preparation method used on a biblical king's deathbed turned out to be biochemically precise in ways that took modern medicine 27 centuries to explain. This content is for educational and historical purposes only. Please consult a qualified healthcare provider before using any plant medicinally, particularly if you are pregnant, nursing, or managing any medical condition.
Number 12. Lemon balm. Melissa officinalis. It spreads through garden beds with quiet determination, filling corners with soft, lemony-scented leaves that most gardeners either tolerate affectionately or pull out with mild frustration. The Carmelite monks of 14th century Paris produced a famous Melissa-based preparation called Carmelite water, used for centuries as both a digestive tonic and a remedy for nervous exhaustion. That tradition did not emerge from superstition, it emerged from observation. Lemon balm contains rosmarinic acid, flavonoids including luteolin and apigenin, and volatile compounds with documented antimicrobial and antiviral properties. Rosmarinic acid specifically has demonstrated in laboratory studies inhibitory activity against herpes simplex virus type 1 and type 2, influenza, and several bacterial respiratory pathogens. Clinical trials using standardized lemon balm preparations have shown statistically significant reductions in the frequency and severity of cold sore outbreaks. The same rosmarinic acid inhibits the enzyme GABA transaminase, increasing the availability of GABA in the brain and producing the gentle anxiolytic effect that medieval healers observed and documented before the word anxiolytic existed. Steep 1 teaspoon of dried lemon balm leaves in just boiled water for 10 minutes, covered to preserve the volatile oils. Drink warm before sleep or at the first sign of a cold sore or respiratory illness.
Number 11. Violet. Viola species. Common blue violet and its wild relatives appear across temperate lawns in early spring, their small purple flowers opening before most other plants have decided the season is safe. Traditional Native American nations used violet leaf and flower preparations for respiratory illness, headache, and skin conditions across dozens of separate nations with no shared medical tradition. European folk medicine documented violet for coughs, sore throats, and inflammatory skin conditions from the earliest herbal manuscripts. Violet leaves and flowers contain rutin, quercetin, and salicylic acid derivatives alongside mucilage that coats and soothes inflamed tissue.
Rutin has documented activity in supporting capillary integrity and reducing vascular permeability, the mechanism behind its traditional use for bruising and fragile blood vessels. The mucilage fraction makes violet particularly valuable for dry, irritated respiratory passages. Steep a large handful of fresh violet leaves and flowers in just boiled water for 12 minutes for a tea that delivers the rutin and quercetin fraction alongside the soothing mucilage. The small purple flowers in your lawn in April are not decoration. They are the season's first medicine.
Number 10. Red clover, Trifolium pratense. Few plants have been pulled from as many lawns with as little awareness of what was being removed. Red clover grows in dense patches across disturbed meadow edges and unmowed lawn sections, its round pink-purple flower heads appearing from late spring through summer. It was used across Celtic and Anglo-Saxon herbal traditions for respiratory conditions, skin diseases, and as a cleansing spring tonic. Traditional Chinese medicine documented it for similar respiratory indications independently. North American herbalists in the 19th and early 20th centuries included it in formulas for chronic respiratory conditions, with a consistency suggesting genuine observed efficacy.
Red clover contains isoflavones, including formanonatin, biochainin A, didzine, and genistein, phytoestrogens with documented interactions with estrogen receptors and studied effects on menopausal symptoms, bone density, and cardiovascular markers. Multiple clinical trials have found red clover isoflavone preparations significantly reduce the frequency and severity of hot flashes in menopausal women, with results consistent enough to generate pharmaceutical interest and ongoing regulatory attention. The flowers also...
Number 9. Hawthorn, Crataegus monogyna and related species. Hawthorn is one of the most ancient boundary plants in the European landscape, planted at the edges of fields and settlements for centuries, its thorns providing living fencing, and its berries, leaves, and flowers providing medicine. The hawthorn appears in traditional European, Chinese, and Ayurvedic medicine for cardiovascular conditions, with consistency across traditions that shared no texts. The active compounds include oligomeric proanthocyanins, vitexin, quercetin, and hyperoside. The oligomeric proanthocyanins have demonstrated in clinical research the ability to dilate coronary arteries, improve myocardial oxygen supply, and reduce peripheral vascular resistance. Multiple randomized controlled trials on hawthorn preparations for mild to moderate heart failure have produced positive results, and hawthorn extract is now included in the standard herbal pharmacopoeia of Germany and several other European countries as an approved cardiovascular preparation. Steep 1 to 2 teaspoons of dried hawthorn berries, leaves, or flowers in just boiled water for 20 minutes. 1 cup daily.
Number 8. Mullein, Verbascum thapsus. In its second year of growth, mullein stands as a tall, stately spike of yellow flowers rising from a rosette of large, extraordinarily soft gray-green leaves, appearing along roadsides, in gravel, in the disturbed soil at yard edges, wherever the ground has been opened. People notice mullein because it is impossible to miss. Traditional herbalists across Europe and North America used it as their primary respiratory herb for centuries. Native American nations documented its use for lung conditions, with a consistency of application appearing independently across nations, with no shared practice. Mullein leaves contain saponins that directly thin bronchial mucus, mucilage that soothes inflamed respiratory tissue, and verbascosaponin with documented anti-inflammatory activity. Steep 2 teaspoons of dried mullein leaves per cup of just boiled water for 15 minutes. Strain carefully through a fine cloth or coffee filter, as the leaf hairs can irritate the throat if not fully removed. Add raw honey. 2 to 3 cups daily during respiratory illness. The tall yellow spike at the edge of your driveway is one of the most consistent respiratory herbs in the traditional pharmacopoeia of both the Old World and the New.
Number 7. St. John's wort, Hypericum perforatum.
It flowers at midsummer in open fields, meadow edges, and disturbed ground, its small yellow flowers appearing almost too bright against the surrounding green. Its leaves dotted with transparent oil glands that become visible when held up to the light. Traditional herbalists across Europe applied the blood-red oil made from its flowers to battle injuries and burns before any understanding of antisepsis existed. The red pigment that colors the infused oil, hypericin, was understood as the sign of the plant's healing power long before anyone could explain why.
Hypericin and pseudohypericin have demonstrated in laboratory studies potent antiviral activity against enveloped viruses, including influenza, herpes simplex, and in early research, retroviruses, with mechanisms researchers describe as sufficiently interesting to warrant continued investigation. Hyporphorin has documented antibacterial activity against Staphylococcus aureus, including MRSA strains in laboratory conditions, with minimum inhibitory concentrations researchers describe as clinically relevant. The combination of antiviral and antibacterial properties in a single plant is genuinely unusual. Fill a clean glass jar with fresh St. John's wort flowers harvested at peak midsummer bloom, when the flowers release a deep red pigment when crushed between the fingers. Cover completely with extra virgin olive oil. Leave in a sunny window for 4 to 6 weeks, shaking daily. The oil turns a deep blood red as the hypericin infuses. Strain through cloth and store in dark glass. Apply topically to minor wounds, burns, bruises, and nerve pain. Note that St. John's wort interacts with multiple pharmaceutical medications. If you take any prescription medications, consult your healthcare provider before using it internally.
Number 6. Rose hips. Rosa canina and related wild roses. Wild roses grow at the edges of hedgerows, along fence lines, in the transitional spaces between managed and unmanaged land with thorny persistence. Their fruit, the rosehip, appears in late summer and through autumn as small red to orange berries that remain on the plant through the first frosts. Traditional communities across Europe, Asia, and North America harvested rosehips specifically for their vitamin C content during the winter months when fresh fruit was unavailable. During the Second World War, when citrus imports to Britain were disrupted, the British government organized a national rosehip harvesting program specifically because wild rosehip syrup was identified as the most reliable available source of vitamin C for the civilian population. That decision was based on nutritional analysis, not folk tradition.
Rosehips contain between 10 and 100 times the vitamin C of oranges by weight, depending on the species and ripeness. They contain beta-carotene, vitamin E, vitamin K, and a group of polyphenols, including tyleroside, a specific flavonoid with documented anti-inflammatory effects that has been studied for joint conditions with positive preliminary results. A European clinical trial found rosehip powder preparations produced significant reductions in joint pain scores in osteoarthritis patients, with results researchers described as meaningful. The seeds inside rosehips contain their own distinct fatty acid profile, including trans-retinoic acid with skin regeneration properties now used in cosmetic preparations. To prepare rosehip tea, halve fresh or dried rosehips and remove the seeds and internal hairs, which can cause irritation. Steep 2 teaspoons of prepared rosehips in just boiled water for 15 minutes. The flavor is bright, tart, and pleasantly fruity. 1 cup daily through autumn and winter as a vitamin C and anti-inflammatory tonic.
Number 5. Figs. Ficus carica. 2 Kings chapter 20. King Hezekiah is dying. The prophet Isaiah delivers a death sentence. Then the message reverses. Hezekiah will recover. But the recovery does not come through prayer alone. Isaiah gives a specific botanical instruction. Take a cake of figs and apply it to the infected wound. The scripture records that Hezekiah recovered and lived 15 additional years. For centuries, readers treated this as incidental. Then,
researchers analyzed fresh figs biochemically. Figs contain phycin, a proteolytic enzyme that breaks down dead and damaged tissue, debriding a wound biologically from the inside out. The same fundamental action that modern wound care uses enzymatic debridement agents to accomplish in clinical settings. Fresh fig latex has shown in cell studies the ability to inhibit the growth of multiple bacterial strains and accelerate the early inflammatory resolution phase of skin healing. Figs also contain psoralins with well-documented antimicrobial activity and benzaldehyde with studied ability to inhibit bacterial biofilm formation, the protective structure that makes wound infections so difficult to treat. Isaiah did not guess, he prescribed. And 2,700 years before enzymatic debridement became a clinical protocol, the prescription worked. Eat fresh figs at peak ripeness for maximum internal enzyme content. 3 to 4 dried figs daily provide exceptional calcium, potassium, magnesium, and B vitamins. For topical application, mash ripe fresh figs into a soft paste and apply to minor infected skin, covered loosely.
Number 4. Meadowsweet, Philopendula umaria. It grows in damp meadows, beside streams, along the edges of wet ditches and low-lying ground. Its creamy white flower clusters carry a strong, sweet, almond-like fragrance that made it one of the most highly regarded strewing herbs of medieval Europe, used to cover floors and freshen air in the days before modern hygiene. But its reputation in traditional medicine ran far deeper than its fragrance. Celtic peoples considered it one of the most sacred plants in their pharmacopoeia. Queen Elizabeth I was recorded as preferring meadowsweet above all other strewing herbs. And its medicinal use for pain, inflammation, and fever was documented consistently across European folk medicine for centuries before the modern era.
Meadowsweet contains salicylates, including methyl salicylate and salicin, the natural compounds from which aspirin was originally synthesized. Aspirin, acetyl salicylic acid, was developed by the Bayer Pharmaceutical Company in the 1890s, specifically by chemically modifying the salicin identified in meadowsweet and willowbark. The synthetic version was designed to be more stable and standardizable. What the plant provides is the original, alongside a buffering mucilage fraction that traditional herbalists and modern researchers have both noted reduces the gastric irritation that pharmaceutical aspirin is known to cause. The combination of anti-inflammatory salicylates with protective mucilage in the same plant is an example of what herbalists call synergy, and what pharmacologists are still working to fully understand. Steep 2 teaspoons of dried meadowsweet flowers and leaves in just boiled water for 15 minutes. The flavor is gently sweet, with a soft almond note and a clean finish. 1 to 2 cups daily for pain and inflammatory conditions. Do not use if allergic to aspirin or taking anticoagulant medications.
Number 3. Elderberry, Sambucus nigra. The elder tree grows along fence lines, at the edges of woodland, in hedgerows and disturbed ground, producing flat-topped clusters of small white flowers in early summer, followed by deep purple-black berries in late summer and autumn. Across virtually every culture in the temperate world that had access to it, elder was called the medicine chest of the people. Germanic folk tradition held the elder sacred. Traditional medicine across Russia, Eastern Europe, and the British Isles documented its berries, flowers, bark, and leaves for conditions from respiratory illness to rheumatism to wound healing, with a breadth of application unusual even by the standards of traditional herbalism.
Elderberries contain anthocyanins, particularly cyanidin-3-glucoside and cyanidin-3-sambubioside, alongside quercetin, rutin, and sambunigrin. A clinical trial published in a peer-reviewed journal found that elderberry syrup significantly reduced the duration of influenza in patients who received it compared to placebo, with the proposed mechanism involving compounds that inhibit viral neuraminidase, the same enzyme targeted by pharmaceutical antiviral drugs.
A meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials found elderberry supplementation substantially reduced upper respiratory symptoms, with effect sizes researchers described as clinically meaningful. The berries must be cooked before consumption, as raw elderberries contain sambunigrin, which causes nausea. Simmer fresh or dried elderberries with water and raw honey for 20 minutes. Strain and store in glass in the refrigerator. 1 tablespoon daily through respiratory illness season. The dark berried tree at the edge of your property is not ornamental. It is one of the most clinically studied medicinal plants in the temperate world.
Number 2. Calendula. Calendula officinalis. Calendula spreads from seed into garden beds, pathways, and disturbed soil with cheerful efficiency, its bright orange and yellow flowers opening each morning and closing each evening with a regularity that earned it the name pot marigold and gave it an ancient association with the rhythms of the sun. Egyptian culture associated its golden flowers with the sun's healing energy. Traditional use across European, Ayurvedic, and Arabic medicine for wound healing, skin inflammation, and digestive conditions has been documented with unusual consistency for over 2,000 years. Modern research has confirmed mechanisms for nearly every traditional application.
Calendula contains triterpene saponins, including oleanolic acid glycosides, with documented anti-inflammatory, antifungal, and wound healing activity. It contains flavonoids, including isoramnitine and quercetin, and polysaccharides that stimulate immune cell activity and accelerate tissue regeneration. Clinical research has confirmed calendula preparations superior to petroleum jelly for radiation-induced dermatitis in cancer patients, effective for episiotomy healing after childbirth, and comparable to standard treatments for seborrheic dermatitis in controlled trials. The evidence base for topical calendula is robust enough that it now appears in multiple pharmaceutical-grade preparations in European markets. Infuse dried calendula flowers in extra virgin olive oil at a ratio of 1 cup of flowers per 2 cups of oil, left in a warm place for 4 to 6 weeks, strained through cloth. This oil applied topically addresses wounds, burns, rashes, and inflammatory skin conditions, with mechanisms now documented in peer-reviewed literature. The bright orange flowers self-seeding through your garden bed are among the best-studied wound-healing plants in traditional medicine.
Number 1. Comfrey. Symphytum officinale. Comfrey grows with persistent abundance in rich, damp soil, in gardens, and at the edges of cultivated ground. Its large, rough leaves and clusters of tubular purple or white flowers becoming familiar once you learn to recognize them. Traditional European and Asian medicine called it knitbone, boneset, and bruisewort, names that preserve directly in language what healers observed it doing over centuries of documented use. Before that observation had a chemical explanation, it was preserved in a name. The active compound allantoin, present in comfrey root and leaves at concentrations higher than in almost any other plant source, promotes cell proliferation and tissue regeneration through mechanisms now fully understood at the biochemical level.
Allantoin stimulates fibroblast activity, the cells responsible for generating connective tissue, and has been incorporated into pharmaceutical wound care preparations specifically because the research on its regenerative properties is so consistent. Comfrey also contains rosmarinic acid, with documented anti-inflammatory and antiviral properties, and mucilage that reduces surface inflammation. Multiple randomized controlled trials on topical comfrey root preparations have confirmed significant reductions in pain and swelling from ankle sprains, back pain, and osteoarthritis, with the evidence base now strong enough to support comfrey-based pharmaceutical preparations in several European countries. Important note, comfrey contains pyrrolizidine alkaloids that can cause liver damage with internal consumption. External topical use is where the evidence is strongest and safest. Apply comfrey-infused oil or fresh leaf poultice to sprains, bruises, and areas of musculoskeletal pain.
The plant your grandmother grew at the corner of the garden and called knitbone knew exactly what it was doing.
The principle running through every plant on this list is the same principle embedded in every ancient healing tradition ever documented. The medicine was never only in the laboratory, it was in the earth, in the plants that grew from that earth, in the specific places where people lived. Ezekiel saw trees beside a river and was told their leaves were for healing. Sirach wrote that the wise person does not reject the medicines the earth produces. Those were not poetic gestures. They were precise observations about the relationship between the natural world and the human body, a relationship that modern pharmaceutical science is now confirming, one isolated compound at a time, with the humility that comes from arriving late to a conversation that has been going on for thousands of years. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling me which of these 12 is growing in your